Let's solve Only Murders in the Building, Episode 8, Fan Fiction. Spoilers for the first 8 episodes. If you haven't seen Episode 8...
you got to see the rest of them, too. I mean, you got to see 1, and then there's 2 and 3, and then there's 4 through 7.
That's a good point there, Catfish. Okay, we're going to be breaking down each episode for clues, suspects, and red herrings on the hunt to learn who killed Tim Kono, as well as who killed Evelyn the cat.
Wait, Evelyn the cat is dead?
Right.
You know what? You need to watch all first 7 episodes. You won't know about Evelyn the cat.
That's a good point. Remember, she's in the freezer. So, as well as who poisoned Winnie the dog.
Wait, there's a dog? Wait, well, hold on, though. But what about who killed Jan? And is Jan even dead?
Right.
What if Jan faked her own death? We don't know any of these things. What if she waited silently by the door for like 3 hours with a fake thing and waited for him to knock on the door?
Catfish.
Yep.
You're being reverse helpful now.
What? Oh, no. But you know what is helpful?
What?
My safe word is Bubba.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I had to ask Catfish to leave. He was acting a bit like Yoko Jan, breaking up the fun team. Please subscribe to the podcast. Follow the podcast. If you're on YouTube, tickle that like button. Please leave comments. Send us tweets at PHQ, Twitter and Instagram. If somehow you're still on Facebook after the 60 Minutes report, go to facebook.com/PHQ. Leave us your comments there. Unlike Teddy Dimas, we don't value silence. Before we dig into the clues and suspects, we want to award our last laugh of the week. This is the most hilarious moment in the episode, and this episode 8 was filled with laughs. But in this case, we're going to go with Superfan Marv's sad life, which he explained in a simple sentence. My daughter says I'm not welcome at her wedding. Oh, Marv, that's tough. In this week's Double C, credit clues, you're going to see up on top of the Arconia, there are some fans. Just like in the episode, there are a bunch of fans down on the sidewalk, the Arconiacs, waiting for the latest episode of the podcast. I got to be honest, if they were upset with that wasted episode focused on Sting, how are they going to feel about the last episode of the podcast without any verbal talking in it? We love interacting with you guys. Hey, let us know. Are you part of the Hayden maidens? Are you a Putnut? What about the Mabelines? Let us know. Write us in the comments. Let us know. What do you think? Which team are you on? In our news outside the Arconia, I know some people have said, how come this show isn't more popular? Well, if you trust The Hollywood Reporter and the Nielsen Company, they're trying to create these ratings called streaming charts, and they looked at the week of August 30th to September 5th. There was a big move for Hulu. That's the app you watch the show on in the United States. Again, around the world, you can watch it on Disney+, Star, Star Plus, Hotstar. But here in the United States, it's on Hulu, and Hulu, for the first time ever, had 2 shows in the top 10 of this Nielsen streaming chart. So they had, as the most streamed shows for that week, they had Clickbait, Money Heist, and Turning Point, 9/11, and The War on Terror. Those 3 shows are all on Netflix. But here on Hulu, number 4, Only Murders in the Building. And they claimed that 444 million minutes were viewed. Now, of course, this isn't one episode. This is all the episodes combined, but they say 444 million minutes viewed. This show's popular. Prove it by clicking the like button and leaving us a comment. Before we run down the suspects, let's look at what episode 8 taught us about the victim, Tim Kono. Tim bought Zoe's ring from the jewelry cutter that Tavo, Mabel's cousin, had set Tim up with. He got the ring, the infamous green ring which Zoe wore, the day before he was killed. So we can believe he had it with him, and then it was either taken after Tim was killed, or Tim passed it along to somebody else. Tim was searching for the emerald ring, trying to correct his mistake from 10 years ago, which led to Oscar's incarceration. As many of us suspected would come down the pike, Tim was poisoned and dead before he was shot in the head. This is going to be important to think about the timeline of this. We don't know how quick this poison would act, but it's unlikely that during the fire alarm, somebody got Tim to drink something that killed him immediately, and then that person shot him in the head. Most likely, they would have had to poison Tim, wait a bit of time for the poison to go into effect and kill him, set off the fire alarm or use the fire alarm as a means to get back into his apartment and make it look like he killed himself. What's interesting is this drug, and I'm going to mispronounce it, secobarbital. is used to euthanize people. So there's no reason why the killer couldn't have pretended that Tim killed himself by taking this drug because he was so lonely. Showing some Wikipedia-level research, it is a sedative. It can treat people who have trouble falling asleep, who are suffering from insomnia. It could also make patients sleepy before surgery or medical procedures. The secobarbital, which can be called Seconal, was widely abused, and it was known on the streets as Red Devils, according to Wikipedia. The New Jersey hockey team is known as the New Jersey Red Devils. Is that a coincidence? Does that mean anything? We'll find out. Side effects of secobarbital include impaired motor functions, dizziness, anxiety, confusion, headache, nightmares. One thing people online have grabbed onto is that this drug, once again, can be used to euthanize people or animals. Is it possible a veterinarian, like Oliver's son Will, could have access to this? Is it possible that Howard the cat guy was thinking about using this to take down his cats? It's important to remember, Charles has one of Evelyn the cat's leg. They could test that cat and find out themselves, even though Howard Morris said he was getting a toxology report. Okay, that's Tim Kono. Now let's look at the usual and the unusual suspects. But before we even do that, I have to be honest, I'm thinking about a comment from last week we got from Jillian. Jillian asked the question, are we positive only murders in the building is a fair play mystery? And on last week's podcast, I said, well, Jillian, they did have a shot. You did have to kind of unblur it and brighten it up a bit. But you could see Theo Dimas at the New Year's Eve party where Zoe died. Based on that, I said, well, I believe the show was fair play. But then I started thinking about it based on this episode. We're told we need to find out the who, the how, the why, and the why now. But Zoe's murder doesn't work within the show's system. The who, okay, you could figure out that Theo Dimas was involved based on that shot. The how, Zoe was pushed off the building. Anybody could push anybody off the building, you would assume. The why and the why now. Before we saw that episode, we would have thought the why and the why now is because Theo Dimas discovered Zoe wearing that stolen ring. But that actually wasn't the why, and that wasn't the why now. The why was because Zoe was mocking him and they had a relationship. And the why now was because she mocked him to his face. Again, in my opinion, it felt like an accidental death. But there's no way, before we saw that episode, that we could have known the why of Theo and Zoe being in a relationship. The show hadn't given us any clues. So we might have guessed that. But there's no clues that could have led us to know that Zoe had a relationship of any sort with another guy other than Oscar. So that's not really fair play if we have to guess at certain elements. I am crossing my fingers, crossing my toes, crossing my eyes that this is going to be a fair play mystery and our videos of trying to solve who killed Tim Kono will pay off. But that Zoe death really wasn't truly fair play. Based on what we were told today, let's apply the who, the how, the why, and the why now to all of our suspects, and let's see what we come up with. A second ago, I mentioned Oliver's son, Will. A lot of people online have really been focusing on Will, Oliver's son. We know he went to veterinary school. Somehow, even though Oliver blew the college fund trying to make his show Splash the musical. Other reasons why people online seem to be focusing on Will is that when Charles and Oliver referenced a podcast Daddy's Little Helper a few episodes ago, that podcast was based around the son being the killer. Another reason why people are focused so much on Oliver's son Will all of a sudden is in last week's episode, Teddy sang a song to his deaf son Theo. That song was from the musical Carousel, and it was the song My Boy Bill. That sounds very close to Oliver's son Will. My Boy Bill, Oliver's son Will. There also does seem to be a recurring fascination with fathers and sons. In this week's episode, Teddy mentions to Oliver, it's not good for a son to see or hear his father say certain things. Once again, putting an emphasis on a father-son relationship, and so people are using that to focus on Oliver's son Will. Well, let's apply the questions to him. The who. In this case, let's say it's Will. The how. That's a bit tricky. If we trust Lester the doorman, nobody but Arconia residents was in the building when the gun went off. Would the doorman consider Oliver's son Will an Arconia resident? That's a bit doubtful, but for sake of argument, let's say that's true. Next up is the why and the why now. There doesn't seem to be a true connection of Will to Tim Kono. Not a connection that we can see. Did we miss something? Please write to us at DoublePHQ on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/DoublePHQ, and let's look at it. But right now, we have a real hard time coming up with the why or the why now. Next, let's look at another popular suspect from recent weeks, Jan Bellows, Charles's girlfriend/former girlfriend. Is Jan alive? Is Jan dead? Either way, there is a chance that Jan was involved in Tim Kono's death. In this episode, Jan is quick to stop pointing the finger at Teddy Dimas. She keeps pointing out how flimsy the evidence really is against Teddy. She never mentions Theo, but against Teddy in the crime of killing Tim Kono. Her focus keeps pointing towards Howard Morris, the cat guy. She doesn't go further in why she thinks that before she gets into a bit of trouble. Now, Jan, I joked that she was the Yoko. Let's put Jan through the questions. The who, Jan, the how. Well, okay, somebody had to poison Tim Kono. So how Jan would have done it is he was on the 6th floor before he went up to his apartment. Is it possible he was going there to see Jan? Maybe because he's such a complainer, maybe he was complaining about her bassoon playing so much in the courtyard. While she's there, she offers him something to drink. He takes the poison. That is how she could have done it. Then during the fire alarm, she could have snuck up to Tim Kono's apartment. He would have had to let her in, we assume. Then she shoots him. All right, that's the how. The why and the why now. Again, even with Jan, we're having to question what it could be. We know Jan's parents remarried and she was scarred by that. We know Jan had a sister who she competed with and gave up the flute for. But any connection of a why with Tim Kono? Again, I'm having a hard time see it. If you guys can write to us and let us know. Well, let's go to Crackpot Corner. This green ring seems to be more important than the very first ring we found in episode 1, the engagement-looking ring. All right, so let's say Tim Kono is going to people and trying to return jewelry that he's found that the Dimases have stole. Where would those rings have come from? They would have come from dead people. Does Jan have a former relative who died, who would have had a ring stolen by the Dimases that then Tim Kono would have, and by showing it to people, they would be like, uh-oh, we can't show that anymore, hide it? I can use that logic on some other suspects, but again, I'm just having a hard time finding it for Jan. Give me a why and a why now for Jan. People, leave those comments. Write us on Facebook and Twitter. Let us know. Teddy Dimas. The Dimases were in the courtyard. They couldn't have been the ones who actually pulled the trigger and caused Tim's head to get shot with a bullet. But because we know Tim was poisoned, who's to say that when he visited the 6th floor, they didn't slip him the poison? There's also no reason why the Dimases couldn't have paid someone to shoot Tim Kono to cover up the poisoning. Teddy brings up the fact that he did have frustration with his deaf son Theo, and that ended up in the end of his marriage. But somehow, he ended up with a child. Where is the mother of Theo? How did this mother go? Did she refuse sign language, like he was implying certain parents do? Another thing that makes you want to keep an eye on Teddy is that he pushed the podcast to end with the idea that Tim committed suicide from loneliness. Was Tim lonely? Isn't Charles the only lonely character we've really seen? Is it odd that Teddy is able to mention the reason that matches Tim Kono's suicide notes? Let's do the questions. The who? Teddy Dimas. The how? He poisoned him earlier in the day, then paid somebody else to sneak in and shoot him. The why? Tim Kono was about to reveal his criminal underworld. The why now? He was about to reveal his criminal underworld. But the show is trying to point us away from the Dimases. Do we keep Teddy on the list? Do we keep Theo on the list? What do you guys think? Let us know. Personally, I feel like we keep them on for a bit, but the show is pivoting hard away from them. Uma Heller appeared in this episode, ever so briefly, as she listened to the podcast with Arconian Bunny. Let's look at Uma for a bit. Last week, Uma appeared on the 6th floor for no discernible reason. She lives down on the 3rd, and so why was she on the 6th? We have no idea. But the fact that she was on the 6th could help with the how. She has a connection to the 6th floor, so she could give Tim Kono the poison that would kill him. The why and the why now? Well, Tim did yell at her for smoking outside. That's very little, but we do have that. Let's put Bunny through the exact same thing. The who, Bunny, how. She had a package that Tim Kono was expecting. Could they have met up and she used that as a way to poison him? Let's point out Bunny knows sign language. Is Bunny Theo's mom in a very odd crackpot corner? Hey, let's just go with it. Why and why now? If Bunny is Theo's mom, that would be a reason for her to kill Tim Kono at that why now moment. She wants to keep her son out of trouble. Howard Morris. Okay, so if he's the who, let's talk about the how. He goes to Tim Kono to talk about the complaints about the cat, and somehow in that meeting, he gets Tim to ingest some poison. The why and why now? Again, I'm struggling on the why and why now for so many of these characters. Well, maybe Tim Kono caused a lot of trouble at Christmas, right? He got the fireplaces shut down. Maybe by doing that, one of Howard's cats died in a fireplace because it couldn't escape and starved to death. Howard was angry, went to Tim Kono's apartment, and killed him. This is complete speculation. There's nothing in any of these episodes to imply that's true, but I am trying. I am trying to get a why and why now for these characters. Any ideas for Howard? Let's hear them. Let's go to our big four. Oscar, the other male Hardy Boy. How does he do it? That's an interesting question. He does go up the fire alarm, so he could have been the one to shoot Tim Kono in the head. But how did he get Tim Kono to get the poison ahead of time? How does Oscar get poison like that? Questions. The why and why now? Oscar realizes he wasted 10 years of his life because Tim was a weakling. If Tim Kono was actually going to repair Oscar's name and reputation. I've never thought Oscar was involved. I still don't, but at least that's some reason for a motive. What do you guys think about Oscar? We are going through these suspects quick. What do you think? The big three. Okay, listeners always get upset when I mention the big three, but we know so much about them, we can sometimes answer questions about them. Let's look at Oliver in this episode before we put him through the question ringer. We learned that Oliver is familiar with corpses. Okay, that's interesting. We also know that if Jan isn't involved herself, somebody put a note on Jan's door. Well, who could have done it? Who would have done it? It's very hard for me to understand how some of these other suspects might have known Jan was involved and would have put a note on Jan's door. But Oliver could have. Oliver left to go get some dip while everybody else was in that meeting up in his apartment. He had the free time to go downstairs and put a note on Jan's door. He also really didn't like Jan. Let's do the question on Jan's attack. The who. Let's say it's Oliver. The how. The first how is that when he goes to get dip, he has the free time to go put a note on her door to say, I'm watching you. The why and the why now, she kept trying to stop people from pointing the finger at Teddy Dimas. If Oliver's the killer, he wants somebody else to take the rap for this quickly. And so he would want her to shut up so they could put out the podcast and lay the blame at Teddy Dimas. The why now? Well, perhaps he thinks she's too smart and she's got to go. She's got to be silenced right now before she and Charles can talk again and she can point out all the flaws in the Teddy Dimas theory. Let's do the who, how, the why, and the why now with Oliver and Tim Kono. All right, we're going to have to start on this case with the why. Well, Oliver has lost a lot of money. He's broke. He's on the elevator. A guy gets on the elevator and says, my name's Tim Kono with a K. Oliver realizes, hey, I'm broke because this guy lost me a lot of money. This guy who lives in the building. Oliver decides to kill him. Oliver, because of his access to his son Will's drugs, has this poison material. Oliver goes down to Tim Kono's apartment, talks with him, maybe even gives him some gut milk, poisons Tim Kono. Oliver's got to make this look like suicide, make this more dramatic, make it a gunshot. So Oliver turns on the chimney in his apartment, thereby setting off the fire alarm to get everybody else out of the building. Oliver loads up his dog Winnie's cart and puts things in there like a gun, for example. Then he goes down to Tim Kono's apartment. As he's going down to Tim Kono's apartment, Evelyn the cat, who was on his floor, follows him down to Tim Kono's apartment. How he gets into Tim Kono's apartment, I don't know, but he gets in, and then he shoots Tim Kono, types up some suicide notes, and then says, ooh, remember we saw Tim with a bag of garbage. I'll go drop that down this garbage chute. Oliver leaves the building, then arrives at the restaurant later than Charles, aka what was he doing with that extra time? He was murdering Tim Kono. It works. I'm not sure I believe it too much, but that is a theory that kind of works. What do you guys think about this Oliver Putnam guilty look? Next up, Charles-Haden Savage. I'm not sure we learned too much new about Charles in this episode, but once again, let's do the who, the how, the why, and the why not with Charles. But in this case, I'm going to go really crackpot corner and really big. In the very first episode, Charles tells Mabel he's lived alone for 28 years. Yet he later tells Jan that he had a relationship that lasted 6 years with his ex, Emma, and her 7-year-old daughter, Lucy. Did they not live together during this 28 years? We also have the fact that Charles has said that making the podcast is the most he's felt alive in a decade, not 28 years ago. The timeline on Charles is very, very tricky. Now let's talk about something crazy. There's this disappearance of Emma, his ex, and Lucy. We know Lucy's alive because she's doing FaceTime with Arnov's wife or daughter. But what happened to Emma? Did Emma have a green ring and may have died? Emma went into a funeral home because she died? And that ring was stolen? Suddenly, Charles sees that green ring in Tim Kono's possession? Maybe he does something drastic. The how? Once again, he would have to go down to Tim Kono's apartment and poison him. Why he would have that poison, I don't know. But he does seem to have trouble sleeping, maybe. He is lonely, so maybe he has that drug and then decides to kill Tim Kono. He poisons him. Later on, when the fire alarm goes off, Charles sneaks down, he picks the lock, gets into Tim Kono's apartment, shoots him, kills him, takes that green ring back, and leaves. Why now? Because he has the ring he's always wanted, Emma's ring. Did he murder Emma? Who knows? This is crackpot corner. But there is so much that doesn't make sense with Charles. Mabel Mora. Okay, here we go, folks. Hold on to your hats. Once again, I went back to that first episode. Charles notes how she lives in that giant apartment. How does she want her and Charles to get into Bunny's apartment to find the package? She wants to go through a vent. Is Mabel going through a vent the big, painful noise that Dr. Grover Stanley complained about in last week's episode? Keep that in the back of your mind. Mabel, when she was talking to Charles in the first episode, said it was the first time she was alone in forever. But wasn't she living with her mom? How was she alone? What's going on with that aunt who does or doesn't exist? What if that aunt died and it was the aunt's ring? And then that ring was stolen from the aunt in the Dimas' scheme. Then it goes around and she's trying to find it. The who? Mabel. The how? Well, she knows Tim. If Tim found the ring, he might have gone to Mabel and said, "Hey, Mabel, look, I finally got the green ring. We can prove Oscar's innocent." She then would have had the chance to poison him. And because she had a relationship with Tim Kono, it would have been easier to see her rather than anybody else poisoning him. Thinking about the poison, remember Mabel's mom said that Mabel had night fears, night tremors. Is it possible she would have been given a sleeping aid from her doctor to help with those night terrors, those night tremors? So she would have the drug that was used to kill Tim Kono. Mabel poisons Tim when they're together, then leaves him. Then, after the fire alarm goes off, Mabel gets into Tim Kono's apartment through somebody else's vents. A fire alarm going off would allow her to get into somebody else's apartment, or maybe even her own, go down the vents to Tim's apartment and get in. She gets in, she shoots Tim, she has to type up some suicide notes, and then get out. Later on, she finds those suicide notes or plants them in the dumpster down below. The why and the why now. Ooh, again, people, I need help. That's why we're doing this together. That's why this podcast is titled, Let's Solve Only Murders in the Building. We are trying to do this together. We're trying to come up with answers. It hurts my brain trying to come up with some of these theories. What do you guys have? We had so much feedback this week at Double PHQ. The word double, the single letter P for podcast, HQ for headquarters, at Double PHQ on Twitter. A user who goes by just me, who's at SezCritGroove, it's Secret Groove, but S-E-Z Crit Groove on Twitter, wrote, "I am surprised that there were secret rooms in the Dimas apartment. What if the real reason that people can't use their fireplace is because there are secret rooms and passages all over the building, and smoke from the fireplaces would be dangerous for the person sneaking around them? Ooh, that is a smart idea," says Crit Groove. Also on Twitter, Laura, who's at Laurz, L-A-U-R-Z on Twitter, wrote, "Have you been listening to the clues the guests give out on the official Only Murders in the Building podcast each week? I have to be honest, I haven't. Laura, I've been trying to see if I can solve this without any outside influence, but I do love that they're making this podcast for people. Apparently, people are trying to come up with an anagram based off the type of ice cream that Oliver grabbed the other day, which was vegan sea salt oil. And it might, let me say might, talk about the killer's real-life hometown. So there are some deep thoughts on Twitter and Reddit about those thoughts, everybody. Feel free to jump in if you like the deep web. On YouTube, Jennifer wrote, I have a strong sense that there are multiple murderers, aka Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. Oh boy, I should have said spoiler for Murder on the Orient Express before I said that. She believed it would be a very Steve Martin thing to do. Joya wrote, I think Zoe's long-lost family member did it, or the owner of the building who is wealthy and the owner of the emerald ring. Ooh, well, Joya, do we know who the owner of the building is? That's a great one. Damien on YouTube wrote, the Zoe mystery is more interesting than Tim's, to be honest. Ooh, how do you guys feel about that? Do you feel there's one mystery more interesting than the other? All this feedback has been great. The comments on YouTube, we really appreciate it. We've got 2 more weeks. There's a chance, yes, a chance, that the killer will be revealed at the end of episode 9 as a cliffhanger to get us to watch episode 10. Or there's a chance that the killer will be revealed right there at the end of episode 10, the final thing to get us to go to season 2. What do you guys want to see? Do you have better who's, how's, whys, and why nows than I do? Please write to us. I'm encouraging you. Everybody knows Facebook has had a lot of trouble, but if you're on Facebook, facebook.com/PHQ, Twitter and Instagram @PHQ, YouTube, leave those comments. I'm begging you to give us that thumbs up. I still think we're going to do it. I still think we're going to solve who killed Tim Kono. I'll see you guys next week.